Welcome to another episode of ResearchPRO, Hidden Figures in Fundraising. Today, I am so super excited to have a very special guest, Sharise Harrison. And Sharise is currently the Director of Prospect Management and Research at Loyola University of Chicago. Just prior to that, she was Vice President of Advancement Analytics and Advancement Services at Grenzebach, Glier and Associates. And prior to that, Sharise spent 4 years as Senior Director of Prospect Management and Analytics at Santa Clara University. And I want to call that out because while you were there, your team was awarded the 2021 District 7 Platinum Finalist Award for Best Practices in Advancement Services. I think it's fair to say you know what you're doing. And you've also had leadership positions within prospect management and prospect research for Teach for America, the Humane Society of the United States, University of Kentucky Healthcare, Women for Women International, and Georgetown University. You can also find Sharice's articles in publications such as the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and Sharise was recently elected a board member for Association of Prospect Researchers for Advancement, or as it's also known, APRA. So welcome, Sharise. I feel like there should be some live audience applause there. Welcome, and thank you for participating in the ResearchPRO ResearchPRO project.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Regina.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. I have a couple of prompts that I like to start with. So I'm always really curious about how individuals get into the practice of philanthropy, and curious if it predates your professional work. Is this something, or is philanthropy and generosity something that you've been engaged in a long time? So we'll start there. What was your introduction to the practice of philanthropy?
My introduction to the practice of philanthropy actually came from my great-grandfather. So growing up, both my parents worked, and my great-grandparents were like my babysitters. So I spent a lot of time with them as a young child. And with my great-grandfather, he would have me reading for him, write things for him. So he would get all of these pretty much annual fund mailings. And I would read through all of them, and I would be an active participant in where we would give money. So he would say, we're going to give away this amount of money. We're going to read all these appeals that are coming. And I would read them and say, well, we should give money to this organization, or maybe we should give money to this organization. And I was maybe 6 or 7 years old when we did this. So I was very, very young with understanding that you should give back and you should, give to philanthropy and to charities. And also on the other side of that, I have an uncle who has had a nonprofit that works with the youth in sports in the Washington, D.C. area called SAFE. And he's had that organization, I think, my entire life. So I would volunteer with him and understand how they would put on events, how they would get sponsors, even helping him refile his 501c3 status and those type of things. So I kind of understood the forms and some of the behind the scenes work, just hanging out with my uncle as a teenager and learning these type of things. I would do it in high school. And even when I was in college is when he kind of brought me along to say, here's the paperwork, here's how you do this type of work. So I think it is definitely a family thing. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think you had a choice. I think
I didn't.
I think nonprofit work, I don't think you had a choice there. Like, it's kind of in your blood. I love that. And so I just want to call out the fact that, like, so often what I hear and what I heard a lot doing the Black Gives Back series is that the introduction to philanthropy was very informal. It was just, helping out someone else in your neighborhood. And I love that, this is like really an introduction to the formalized philanthropy. So there's that engagement in, like, you're getting an annual appeal letter, and then to have the granddaughter or the great granddaughter, participating in that decision making it's amazing. I'm getting like goosebumps. I love it. It's such a powerful story. And so I'm curious, although you sort of grew up in it, what was your introduction to professional fundraising?
So I think like most prospect development professionals, I fell
Mm-hmm.
into it and didn't quite
Mm-hmm.
know what it was. When I graduated from college, I actually started working as a high school history teacher. So my undergrad is in history. I think that's also very normal for prospect development.
Yes, I was like, same here,
professionals.
guilty.
I worked at a charter school in DC and it closed. So I had to figure out, well, I need to do something else. And this is way back in the day. I'm aging myself because at this point, I've been in the industry about 20 years. I saw a job ad in the Washington Post for a research assistant at Howard University. And at the time, I lived like 15 minutes from Howard University. I went to high school across the street from Howard University. So I was very familiar with Howard. And I, applied for it, didn't know what it was. And it just so happened to be a research assistant in the prospect research department at Howard University. And at that time, they were the first HBCU to be conducting $1 billion campaign. So pretty much very beginning of my career, I think this was maybe my second or third job out of college. And I've been in it ever since.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. I think my very first job, not in prospect development specifically, but in fundraising. And it was at the Ohio State University, and I came in at the end of their $1.25 billion campaign. So it was like a very interesting time to enter fundraising, and like you have not looked back. It's
Exactly.
really fascinating. Yeah, it's a really fascinating field.
It is. And I do want to call out also that when I was hired at Howard, my first ever supervisor in this industry was a Black woman. So
wow. In prospect development.
Yes.
Wow. What's her name?
Jamie Davis. She, I will never forget walking into that interview, seeing her. I was like, this is great. I did expect to see a Black person because it was Howard, but seeing a Black woman, and my daughter's name is Jamie as well. So I thought this is good. And I remember her saying to me, you have a degree in history, you're smart, you can do this job. And I thought, okay, this is great. And I see her occasionally at APRA conferences, and it's always a pleasure to see her because I credit her with getting me into the industry. And it was such a great experience to learn from her and the rest of my team there.
I love that. That is so interesting because I've spoken with, I've done another interview for this series so far. And that person, her name is Hope, and she also credited a specific individual for bringing her into prospect development. And like, isn't that funny? Like the fact that, I think there's something to be said about that. The profession and the openness and the willingness to share and mentor. I don't have a story of someone, like a single person, that brought me into prospect development, but there was one person that like sort of took me under her wing when I first entered prospect development. It was like, this is how you do this job. This is what this means. And I would get stuck on things like I can't find things, or just, I'm a researcher, I'm a historian as well. And she really just kind of guiding me through like, no, this is how you interpret this. Don't spin your wheels. Go this far, and really helping me to put parameters on myself as a very early researcher. So I think that says a lot about our profession, and more so about the people in our profession.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I think mentorship is so big in prospect development. I think I've had numerous mentors, formal and informal, and I know I've been a mentor to numerous people, and I still maintain mentorship relationships with a lot of people. It's very rare that I don't follow up or want to talk to people or encourage them, because I love this industry so much, and I feel like it's done so much for me that I want to bring as many people as possible into this industry.
Yeah, and I share that love. but we're going to take just a little bit of a turn and focus on some of the challenges. So I'm curious about some of the challenges that you have faced in your career in this industry, however you want to approach it. So certainly sharing the love, but recognizing that, every person, every industry has its fair share of issues.
Yes. I will say being a Black woman in this industry with a heavy focus on data has made me a target at certain places. And I'm also very confident in what I can do and what I know. I always say I grew up as the smart kid, and when you grow up that way, you always have to be right. You don't have the luxury of being wrong. So I always try to, cross my T's, dot my I's, and be ready for anything. And I've had quite a few instances in my career where I want to do something new. I like newness. I like things that change. I want to know what's the best way to do something, because there's always a better way. And I hate busy work. Anything that I have to do is manual. I will put my entire being behind trying to figure out how not to do it.
Yes.
So working even in philanthropy, even though it's heavily female, a lot of the reporting, data science, that type of thing is still heavily male.
Mm-hmm.
And it's heavily male and not necessarily people of color.
Right.
And when I come in and say, okay, well, I have these ideas or I want to do these things, I've been told that I wouldn't understand certain things. I've been told that I shouldn't be doing things that are explicitly in my job description. I've had people actively try to stop me from doing certain work with data. I've had people tell me that they see absolutely no value in my work. Mm-hmm. It's been, I feel like people have said some crazy stuff to me about, well, you can't do this, or you're not going to be able to figure this out. I worked somewhere where I knew the database and how it worked. I've had a lot of jobs where I have to kind of figure things out. And I was working with a reporting team. I spent, and this is not an exaggeration, 3 hours on the phone trying to get a report done. And they still couldn't get it done. And I said, this is insane and this is crazy. Give me access, I can build a report myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of back and forth. Luckily, I had a very, very wonderful supervisor and also team behind me. So not only the person that I reported to, but even their supervisor and everybody, all the fundraisers I worked with, they believed in the fact that I could do everything I said I wanted to do. So that was very helpful, where when we had to take on kind of the central development team to get me access, they begrudgingly gave it to me and said, we're not going to train her. We're not going to teach her anything. Good luck. That's actually how I became a self-taught data scientist. Like, I know SQL, I know all these things because they're like, we're not gonna, I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, I'll figure out how to do this. And I think it was beneficial to me because I wasn't sitting in a class or anything trying to figure it out and just do it and not apply it to something. I was actively trying to accomplish something. So I had to figure out, this is the best way you accomplish X. So even though I've had a lot of adversity with people not willing to work with me, share information with me, or especially when it comes to data, I feel like when people figure I kind of stay in my lane by just doing research or research profiles, it's okay. But as soon as I want to do something that's a bit out of the box and a bit outside of what I look like I should be doing, that's when I've had to fight a lot of fights, but none of it's ever stopped me. So it's whenever it happens, I always kind of say, good luck to the person fighting me because you're not winning.
Yes.
I'm going to do this and I'm going to accomplish this and it's going to be amazing. So I've never allowed it to kind of throw me off or say that I can't do anything, but it's very real in certain places. And I think I've only worked at one place where I felt that that team and that group 100% had my back. This is before people were really talking about DEI and letting people be themselves. And, and I'll give them 100% accolades. It's University of Kentucky Healthcare. That team, and when I say that to people, they're like, really? University of Kentucky? Yeah. And yes, it was, they would go to bat for me. They would say, you know what? you're doing some highly technical things. We really don't understand what you're doing, but we believe in you. We think it's going to be amazing. They paid for me to get my fundraising operations certificate. I got my master's while I was at University of Kentucky. I got it from Georgetown. I was able to accomplish a lot of stuff, and I actually became an expert in data science because they allowed me to do so much work without fighting, trying to fight me on things, which I had experienced before and after that, to be honest. So that, I think, that's really been the biggest challenge of, to me, it's wasting time, because I always go into it like, I'm going to do this anyway. Arguing with me is, we're all just sitting here wasting a bunch of time, because whether I finish this in 6 months or a year, it's getting done. Yeah. So I think that's been, in the industry, the biggest issue. And that issue has come outside of prospect development professionals.
Yes. So that's important to point out as well. And so I've certainly been on those teams. I'm thinking of one team in particular. It was a software design team. The organization was building a CRM in-house. And so I had to participate with the outside software designers. And certainly that was not like my background. But I remember being in those meetings, just in a room full of white men, very tech heavy, IT heavy. And it was just very clear. The sentiment was that, like, what are you doing here? Like, why does she have to be here? It's like, because I represent the actual professional. Like, I represent the end user. I will be training the entire organization on how to use this software. And so I'm here as this bridge, sort of. And so I think I'm calling that out because I think that's an element of our work that we often don't talk about, or we certainly don't. I think just the general public doesn't really understand or realize that it's not just the research, it's not just about data analysis. There are other elements that go into this as well. There are other opportunities where we are a liaison or a bridge between different departments, different functions, and that is I think that's unique space for us.
Yes.
And I love the fact that it's Black women. And so part of the objective for this series was to not really give evidence, but highlight and center and celebrate other Black professionals in this space. So often it feels like I'm the only one. And so often that's what I get from clients, prospective clients, colleagues from across the country. There is this assumption that Black women don't have a role in this space. And we absolutely do. We are, not only do we have a role to play, we have a leading role to play. And we are brilliant and can self-teach ourselves SQL if necessary. I love that. And I also want to point out and call out the fact that what you have done with that adversity and the way that you have used it to fuel you. And so, yes, in being in those software planning meetings where you're the only woman, you're the only person of color, it does feel very isolating. And it's hard to not give up and to not be overwhelmed and to just, not fall victim to imposter syndrome. And so I love the way that you have used that adversity to really channel your continued learning, your continued professional development, and just your overall success.
Thank you. I actually credit that a lot to how I grew up. I don't know if my dad, my uncles, and my grandparents or my great-grandfather would call themselves uber feminist, but I grew up thinking you can understand it, you can do anything. You can, you being a girl has nothing to do with anything. You can, if you want to study this, you can study it. You're intelligent enough to do whatever you put your mind to. And so having that, and when I go into these situations of thinking, oh, these people might not know more than me, it gets shut down really quickly. And it's kind of like, no, they don't. and they don't have anything on you. And you can figure this out, and you're going to look at this in a different way than they are. So I think having that confidence, and I will say throughout my career, sometimes it does border on arrogance, but but I can, if I think about like, oh, I can do this or I understand it, even with certain, because I've had certain things come up where it's like, I don't really know if I get this 100%. I don't know if I really want to talk about this or do this. And someone saying, oh, yeah, you can get this easily. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, you know what, I can. Or, how do I want to exist in being very in control of how I want to be, what I want to do. And I think this industry, unlike a lot of others, has allowed me to do that. I don't feel like I have to be in a box, which is really, really helpful. I think as prospect development has evolved, I've evolved with it to say, oh, I can do these type of things. Earlier in my career, I would have never thought of myself as a data person. I would have thought that this is not something I want to do. This is not something that's going to appeal to me. I've never taken a course in statistics. I've had no formal education around any type of data science. And the fact that I do it and I speak about it, I train people on it all the time. My new thing is blockchain technology, like cryptocurrency, like Web 3.0 things, that I'm like, this is super interesting. And I always tell people that I research and I look into it as a hobby. And I don't know how sad that is, but but it's just, those type of things where it's like, maybe I really do like technology and how we can use it. And I don't have to be in a box where, oh, you're a coder, so this is what coders do. You can create your own identity and whatever that looks like, I feel like, in this industry.
Yes, yeah. And oftentimes it is because the rest of the team doesn't understand what you're doing, or they just don't want to touch the data. And they're like, you do it. It's going to be great. We trust you. You do it. Show us the pretty report at the end. So sometimes there is that freedom, and that freedom can cut both ways, to be quite honest. Sometimes it's like, well, no, I need your engagement. I need you to care about this a little bit more. Than I can't be the only one that cares. But you're absolutely right. So we talked a little bit about the challenges, but for sure, like you said, you love this industry, and there are a lot of reasons. So I want to get into the impact of the work that we do. And so, yes, data science, and it sounds like a bunch of numbers, computers, some figures going off somewhere in the background, but really there is the impact of the organizations that we serve. And so I want to spend some time and center and focus on the impact that we advance as data professionals. So what is the impact of your work, or what type of missions have benefited from your work?
I worked heavily in higher education, which I absolutely love. And I think that being, especially on a college campus, when I'm in-house, I live literally across the street from Santa Clara University. So I get to see students, but even having students work for me, you see that direct connection, not only with what they're raising money for. So I worked at Santa Clara. I had a student worker who received one of the scholarships that I helped, fundraisers find donors for, and different programs that I understand. And when I worked at University of Kentucky Healthcare, I felt like that was the clearest direct of, here is how your work directly correlates to what we're doing, because I had a great group of fundraisers that would come back and tell me about, I had this conversation with this prospective donor, and they're going to give to maybe this, research thing or da-da, and then this doctor who is doing this research maybe creates something, and it's like, wow, or solves a problem. And it's thinking, wow, I can see how my work directly impacts this. And I think that was another reason why I wanted to be back in, an actual organization versus being a consultant, because when you're there and you learn so much more about how your organization works and what the actual focus is. For myself, I get really into certain initiatives and certain programs where even while I'm working there, I'm going to give my own personal money to certain things. Like I'm going to donate. and to see that there are fundraisers working on certain initiatives that I myself am passionate about, that I think like, oh, this is great. I can see directly that when I uncover these prospects or give you information about how to solicit or how to move people through your pipeline, when those gifts actually come in, it's wonderful because it's like, wow, I actually helped get this money. I maybe helped untold amount of students who couldn't afford to be at certain schools to be there, could have helped with new medical research, those type of things. Even when I work places like the Humane Society, of seeing money go towards shutting down animal cruelty organizations, things like that. So I think it's very easy to see like that direct correlation.
Yeah. And I think you pointed out something that's important about the partnership with the gift officers. So it's definitely a give and take. And I'm a strong proponent of like advancing this idea and really articulating this idea that no, the field officer is important, but they can't really do their job effectively without the prospect development professional. Like it is such an important partnership. And it's a piece that, and you may have seen this a lot as a consultant as well, that far too often that's the piece that organizations are missing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they will invest on the frontline side.
And not on the back end.
Yeah.
Where then you have people struggling. It's kind of like, where do you think these fundraisers are going to get all these great prospects from?
Yeah.
Just the screening is not going to do it. You have to figure out who goes in the portfolio when, what type of outreach they need, how all these things fit together. When I was at Santa Clara, I always called us the air traffic controllers. Like we know where everything is all the time. And so we understand this plane needs to go there, this one needs to go here, make sure they don't crash. So we have to look at things constantly. And for a fundraiser, their focus shouldn't be trying to figure out like, well, how do I go through thousands of names and figure out who needs to be in my portfolio? No, just look at your portfolio. Yes. Go out, meet people, talk to them, make the ask. That's your job. And that's what you need to be focused on that. Let us do kind of the heavy lifting, because the way that I think prospect development professionals think about things is different than a fundraiser, but it's complementary.
Yes. Yeah. I love that analogy of air traffic controller. And so like in working in higher ed, I was assigned to, I think, 6 or 7 different colleges. And so all of the health sciences, so like nursing, medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, like all the health related colleges. And so that idea of like, I know what's going on everywhere. I know what's going on in dentistry and how it applies to allied health and how all of that applies to the College of Medicine. And like that idea of like either the puppeteer or the, the air traffic controller, you're at the spot on. And I love that, just absolutely love that. And so it does require a certain level of trust and respect for your prospect development professional, your prospect development partner. Yeah. Have you ever encountered, I'm curious if you've ever encountered a situation where the gift officer was not respectful of your expertise in air traffic control, as it were, and then how you manage that.
Oh, absolutely. I've had fundraisers who absolutely refuse to work with me. Okay. It's like, I don't need you. Like, all right. And a lot of times I can always manage if it's 1 or 2 people, because they're not the majority. And the way that I go at it is, I'm not going to fight with you about working with me, but you will come to me. Yeah. Because you're going to have to work with me. Yes. So I'll be sitting here waiting. You'll get here on your own. I'm not going to try to convince you or, any type of thing. I have started jobs where this, again, no exaggeration, I've had leadership fundraiser managers say to me, well, I don't trust anything that comes out of your team, so we don't work with them. Thinking, okay, well, fine. I have all these other people who are willing to work with me, who want my, my expertise, my knowledge, my ability to do this job. I will spend my time and effort working with them. And I think that is not necessarily the norm.
Yeah.
It's kind of a, I'm not going to fight with you. I had a former VP who said to me, she said, you kind of like, she called me a, she was like, you Jedi mind trick fundraisers into doing what you want to do, because there was something that we were in a meeting and I said, I need everybody to do this. And she 100% said, I am not doing that, Sharise. There is no way that I'm doing that. Maybe 3 to 6 months later, we were in the same meeting and everybody was doing it, including her. And she said to me, it is not lost on me that you got me to do this when I told you specifically I would not do this. She was like, I don't know if you're the fundraiser whisperer or what you do, but, and I didn't fight with her. I didn't, try to over explain, try to convince her. I just said, okay, all right. Yeah. it's don't spend, because again, I hate what I consider wasting time. And I always feel like arguing with people waste time. I feel like if I say to you, hey, I need you to do this, you can ask me questions about it. You can question it. But if you just tell me flat out, well, I'm not going to do it. Okay. All right. Then we'll move on. The people who want to do it will work with me and do this. And we're going to roll out something amazing. And then you're going to have to do it because everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
So I always tell people you need a certain percentage of people on your side who are willing to work with you. And if you don't have it, it's different for every person and every organization. And if you don't have that, you can't be successful. But if you can get that group of people that will listen to you, that will work with you, that will help experiment with you and try new things, you'll be golden. Any of the naysayers or whatever, they're just not important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I think there's this other added element sometimes of like they have to take orders in some ways from a Black woman. And it's like sort of a little bit of resistance there sometimes that nuance is always can be sprinkled in as well.
Yes, because I at Santa Clara, I was the chairperson of our DEI task force for advancement. And it was an excellent group of people. I loved working with them. Very diverse from different groups. There were fundraisers, there were other people who were support staff. And I said, my job is to have all of these upper class and sometimes wealthy white people who are fundraisers do what I need them to do without having any authority over them.
Yes.
And to be able to do that as a Black woman is a very hard thing. You have to master how to do it, because you have no fundraisers have ever reported to me. And typically in prospect development, fundraisers don't report to you. They're never going to report to you. But you need them to do what you have, they have to follow your orders effectively for you to be successful and also for them to be successful too. But what happens when they say, no, I'm not going to do it? Nothing. So you have to figure out a way to convince them that this is in your best interest. And, this is a partnership. This is not I work for you, because typically we don't necessarily work for fundraisers either.
Right.
And I think that's another challenge of
Yes.
people seeing it not as, well, you work for me. It's like, no, I don't. Like, we're partners. We're here. We're not here.
Yes.
That's kind of, a challenge that I've gone in. And for myself, I think I figured out, not necessarily figured out, but I think it lends to my already set personality of how I like to engage with people, how I like to talk to people. When I first graduated from college, I was a high school history teacher. So I kind of know how to navigate people when you're not necessarily, like I had to manage an entire classroom full of students, and I worked at an alternative school. So it was a school where students were kicked out of all the other DC public schools.
Okay.
So it was an extra level on top of that of how do you maintain control in the classroom? How do you do this? How do you do that? So how do you speak to people? I also had a very short stint in being a bill collector.
Okay.
So convincing people to pay for something that they already got. So with a lot of that, I learned, here's how you talk to people. Here's how you convince them that this is what they want to do, even if they don't think that that's necessarily the issue. And I think a lot of that training came along with, even growing up, I recognized that I was taught how to speak to people. So it was very much of, if you request something, here's how you request it. If you're going to we would play interview when I was younger. This shows the kind of environment that I came up in. They were like wholly preparing me for this career, but it's just kind of, and also not taking a lot of things personally. I try not to take impersonal things personally, because I feel like, you know, if someone is critiquing my work, they're critiquing my work, not me. It's, you know, I can make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And then understanding that this person who may have resistance, it may have nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So trying to give grace to other people in situations as well, to say, okay, we're all here for one, but also not stressing myself out about other people not doing what I need them to do. And then a lot of times the prospect development team is scapegoated, where if somebody's not hitting the metrics, or, you know, they're not performing the way that leadership thinks they should be performing, the first thing out of their mouths is, well, my portfolio isn't good.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what I need around this, or I don't know, you know, this type of thing. So understanding that that happens, and that happens a lot, I always say, well, we're going to take that off the table. We're going to create ways to, that was one of the reasons I came up with some of the evaluations and analytics I did around portfolio evaluations, because I went into an environment where that was just the role, that any fundraiser having any issue, the blame would come completely down on my team. And that was before I even got there. And so I said, what we're going to do is we're going to build great portfolios. We're going to make sure they're all great, but we're going to have our own evaluation measures. So when those managers come to me, I'll say, here's why these portfolios are excellent. So you go talk to your people about why they can't seem to make this work.
Yeah.
And then it completely shifted the conversation, where they knew they couldn't come back to us and say it's because of the portfolio. So it's like, well, no, we have the analysis right here of why this should be working.
Yeah. So you kind of speak on or touch on something else. So you talked about, like, you know how to speak to people and you know how to communicate with people, but something else that I think is important in this work or in this role is having those boundaries so that people also know how to speak to you.
Yes.
And I mean, like, those limits of, like, you're not going to speak to me just any kind of way. You're not going to scapegoat me just because it's convenient. You're not going to put down my work just because it doesn't feel valuable to you. You're not going to devalue the work that we do, because there's analysis behind this. And so I think that to perform well and to enjoy these roles, you almost have to have those parameters. And I think in some ways, this is all anecdotal, but I think that in some ways, being a Black woman in those all white environments, it allows us to have those parameters and to achieve a little bit more balance and success than our counterparts. And so I'm specifically thinking about, like, the relationships that I've had with gift officers, where it's like, no, they respect the boundaries. They know when to ask me for work. They know when to submit their things that I request. So this sort of managing up and out, they allow me to manage up and out. Whereas my white colleagues struggled with that. Like, they couldn't figure out, like, why do the gift officers do what Regina wants? Like, why do they come prepared to her meetings? Why do they, and so I wonder, again, it's all anecdotal, but I think that part of it is because we already have to have some boundaries in this space anyway.
I think just existing in this world as a Black woman, you have to have a lot of agency about you with how you just exist, regardless of what industry you're in. And I think you have to be, because and I know the way that I was raised is not necessarily that different from other Black women, where you have to understand that certain things are going to be negative in your life just because you just so happen to be born Black and a woman. And that kind of intersectionality of certain issues, I think, has to create what has become the tropes of aggressive Black women. But it's the idea that, well, we're aggressive because we're not going to let you attack us.
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit here and be attacked or talked to any kind of way. I had an issue at one point. Like, I literally kicked somebody out of my office because I was just like, I have no idea who you think you're talking to. I told people very aggressively before what was not going to happen and why it was not going to happen, and told them this is the nicest response you're ever going to get from me.
Yeah.
So it is kind of,
was it aggressive or just firm?
right. And that's the thing. And it's because I've never yelled at anybody in a professional setting. I've never cursed anybody out in a professional setting ever. But it's kind of but I do say that I will have like the mom voice of like, I will put some intent behind my words so that you understand I'm dead serious here. And we're not going to do this runaround thing, or you're not going to be disrespectful towards me. But it's also being very conscious of those stereotypes of the angry, aggressive Black woman, even though I know that when I appear, especially in a professional setting, I like to be happy. I love to have a good time. I like to engage with people. I like to talk. I like all the stuff. And it doesn't take much for somebody to say, oh my gosh, I was afraid of Sharise. And it doesn't matter how pleasant and nice and kind and fun I've been.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. And so I would intentionally not react because I felt like I was being provoked in certain situations into being an angry person. Especially, I had one particular incident where I was maybe 2 or 3 levels above this person, and they were kind of like, well, you shouldn't be doing this work, and I don't understand why you're doing this. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not arguing with this person. Like, they're really trying to antagonize me and get at me. But my team was there, and my team was so upset. And I said, I'm never going to respond to this person. I'm just not going to respond to them. Because as soon as I do, even if it's, not aggressive, I get painted as aggressive. And this is a thing. So I had to end up stopping meetings with my team and that person and their team. Because I said, my team is not going to hold their tongue. I can, but they are going to go on the attack. And so I said, I don't want to put anybody on my team in that situation. So we're not going to do this. But it's like, I really had to understand what's at stake for certain things. In certain cases, this is something very serious. I'm going to speak up and out about it as much as I can, as loudly as I can. And I don't care who I upset. If this ends up with me losing my job, then so be it. And there are other things that have happened where I was just, this is just not important. Like, this person is not important. They're not going to stop me from doing anything. And I don't care what they say. So
Yes. So I want to turn our attention a little bit to the numbers. So I'm curious about your numbers, and if you have a sense of how many millions or billions that you have identified for organizations in your career total.
Oh, it's got to be multi-billions. It has to be. I work with so many fundraisers. I typically work at the highest levels too, so there's like the big gifts.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, because I don't always remember every single, prospect, but thinking about even my last position before I got to Loyola, because I've only been at Loyola a very short time now, at Santa Clara, creating systems where we could evaluate hundreds of thousands of names very quickly. Just what had come out of that had to have been like millions and millions of dollars. And that was just over 4 years. So thinking about the work that I did before that at University of Kentucky, at Georgetown, even at Howard doing, entry-level things, I feel like it has to be like billions of dollars when you kind of add up a lot of things. Even at University of Kentucky, they didn't have their first grateful patient mailing before I got there. And I got data to a point where they could do that. And so I counted. It's like, just count, because you wouldn't have anything that came from grateful patient, annual fund mailing. Since then, I'm kind of like, I count that for myself because I created that system. And, here's how we did these type of things, and here's how we uncover it. And I think it's also being able to build teams to say, here's how you do this. I worked a lot of places where it was just me. But I love having a team because there's always stuff I don't know. And I think figuring out, when somebody on my team comes to me and like, oh my gosh, I uncovered this person, this is great, this is wonderful. For me, I'm like, yes, excellent. Because, I was able to come in and either hire you or create these systems where it made it easier for you to do that. So I can't say for myself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you're really getting to the heart of the value. So one, the billions, the bag, first off, and I love that we have the receipts. Like, no, it's billions, and this is the reason why. And you absolutely should count that grateful paycheck. And so you may have encountered this as a consultant, and are more readily able to talk about your value and the value add. But so often the prospect development professionals and colleagues that I encounter, we're still struggling with how to talk about our value. And so I have gotten really clear about that as a consultant. Like, no, my value is because I'm going to identify these people for you. And then when I'm gone, the systems that I put in place for you that you haven't yet been able to master, you'll continue to use those systems if you do it right for the rest of your organization, the life of your organization.
Exactly.
And so that is value. That is millions upon millions. That's the comeback, that's all of it. So I appreciate the way that you articulate the value, and then adding into the human resources, the people element of it all. Yeah. And so the sort of the multiplication. So it's not just you're able to then build out these teams that are able to, do more and multiply that work, exponentially. So I think that is really, really important. I'm curious, how would you like to see, or what do you see? What do you have, what vision do you have for the future of our industry, or how would you like to see prospect development grow?
I would like to see us more intentional about getting people into the industry, because everybody I've ever spoken to has fallen into it kind of like I did. You didn't really know what it was, what it did, those type of things. And I think being more intentional about a lot of us work at universities. It's like, why aren't we at the career days? And here's how you get into this. With the students that I've had the pleasure of managing and working with, a lot of them stayed in philanthropy and were like, we didn't know this existed, especially the ones that want to go into STEM and do a lot of the data science type work, where, especially I think for the younger generations that are coming out of college and going through college now, they don't just want to make a lot of money or make money. They want to do something that has, real impact. And you can do that with this job, and you can also apply your background, or you can go to college and get a degree in history and be gainfully employed your entire career. Don't let people tell you otherwise. It's, here's something else you can do other than, I could be a teacher, I could be a historian, I could be a librarian if I go get,
Right.
There's other things. And I think, especially with prospect development, to be more intentional about talking to younger people about students. And even if you're working in a university, bringing the students in, have them do more than data entry. Especially at Santa Clara, there's a huge engineering, computer science, information science programs there, and some of the best talent, I think, in the world for some of my students. They allowed us to do data science work that we could not have done because we did not have the skill set in the Office of Development, because you have to pay people a lot of money to get that skill set, which most development shops don't have. But the students want real life experience. And I would bring them in and say, okay, I know coding can be used to fix this. I don't know how to use it, but this is a problem. You two work together, bring back some ideas for me.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Thinking of more creative ways of, can they do data entry? Sure. But if they're in these classes doing all these very advanced technical things, let them use it. Have them come in. I did not know any type of coding as far as R or Python before I worked with some of the students at Santa Clara. And I sent them off, here's the project, work on it, bring it back to me. I will not say that I know the coding, but now I know if I look at coding that's in Python, I can understand it, because they were also teaching me to say, this is what this is. Here's how we think we can fix this. And so in the process, I'm learning something. I'm helping them, put something on their internship list
Yep.
of here are the projects that I worked on. I just gave a reference for one of my former students who just got a new job for the work that he did, that we actually won the case award for. Like, there is a video that we did, and our student worker is in that video, because of how he was able to kind of crack the code of how we did the work.
I love that. I love that. I'm convinced that it's going to be a prospect development professional that comes along and makes the perfect CRM with, the perfect system that integrates with, the correct, software and all the extra modules, because we, like you said, we bridge all these different operations. We're the liaison. We know where all the moving parts are. We know where all the bodies are buried, as it were. But then that data science piece and that engineering piece is also coming through. I see that as a trend within this industry, and it's starting to take the forefront more and more. And I love that. Like, that's not, like, I'm not an AI, I'm not a coder,
Right.
That's not my specialty. But I love the direction that our industry is going. And I think that's really important. And in many ways, it can be a big part of the equalizer, sort of leveling out the playing field within philanthropy, I think. I know there are people that are concerned about the misuse of data science, et cetera, and the inequities that could be inherent to some data science. But I think there's still some opportunity as well. And then more importantly, opportunity to bring different careers into this work, different career, I guess, paths, and kind of bring them into this work and make them aware of it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. And I think the ethical aspects of kind of the work that we do, I think a lot of people go into it because it's good work. So it's not saying that nobody is, a bad player in philanthropy, because there are some. But overarchingly, the people that you find like in prospect development, even advancement services across the board, it's kind of like, we still want to do something good. It's because I think if you want to go into data science and you just want to make money, this is not the place for you. Right. There's tons of other places that, are doing, because I live in Silicon Valley, so they're all within like 5 minutes of my house.
Yes.
But I think it would be great to see not only like the diversification of who the prospect development professional is, because it's diversified significantly in the 20 years that I've been in the industry. When I first started, I felt like everybody was a librarian.
Yes.
Like, everybody had a background in library science. And it's very different now. And I think moving forward and questioning some of the tried and true things that we do, even with like capacity ratings, thinking about, well, why are we looking at wealth this way? Because we're concerned about philanthropy. Do you have to have wealth to be philanthropic? Absolutely not. So are we thinking about how people outside of the older white cishet man is going to give me gifts? That's not the only person you can get gifts from. So how do we think about how maybe the Black, lesbian woman is going to give you gifts too, because she also has a lot of wealth.
Yes.
And is she not in your portfolio or in your prospect pool because of how we're looking at this, where her ability to give is the same, but the percentage she gives is more? And how do you know that if you don't look at information a different way? If you're only looking at it one way, you're going to leave out a lot of people. And I think that's another thing that should be, not necessarily should be, but can be led by prospect development professionals. There's a lot of talk and work on DEI, especially on the fundraising side, of here's how you engage different prospects. But my question is, well, where are these prospects going to come from? If
Yes.
you're getting all this training on how to work with a diverse group of people, where do you think those prospects are actually going to come from if you haven't been working with them already? How do we figure out how to get them in the pipeline? And I think that's another big thing I would like to see change, not specifically with capacity ratings, but just in how do we qualify and say someone is a good prospect? And it can be different for everybody's organization. It doesn't always have to be about race. It could be about gender. It could be ability. It could be all different types of things. So to think about, are we being inclusive of who our actual constituency is? Like, are we taking a look at who they are based on their identities and how they exist in the world? And are we appealing to that? Or are we just appealing to what the best practice has been, because the best practice is based on something that was created maybe in the 90s?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so in a nutshell, like you really kind of encapsulate the the research pride, and the way that we do show up and the value we do add. Although oftentimes prospect development is in the background, or in the back offices, as it were. We truly are the hidden figures in fundraising and truly do make an impact. So, Sharise, it has been an incredible, incredible pleasure chatting with you. And I thank you again for the work that you do, your leadership in this industry, and your participation in the series.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here and talk to you. And I absolutely love this industry. Whenever you need me, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.